Start on today's subject, which is understanding authentication. So you guys that have been here since term 1 might be wondering why we tackle authentication again. We've seen it on different concepts, but we really need to take a whole lecture to talk about it because there are so many ways to authenticate nowadays that if you understand the concepts, you'll see that bypasses and vulnerabilities are very common in most authentication systems. So quotes for today: passwords are like underwear, don't let people see it, change it very often, and you shouldn't share it with other strangers. So yeah, that's a good quote to remember, to change your passwords and don't show them to anyone. So firstly, we need to understand the difference between authentication and authorization. Here today we talk about authentication because it's the process where you check the user's identity first. So authorization is what will come after. Who is allowed to do what? Who's authorized to do what? But authentication is the initial step where you verify someone's identity. Is he who he says he is? That's authentication. So every secure system must respond to these questions. Who is the guy that's trying to log in? Can you prove you're that person? And should you be trusted? With what should you be trusted? That's authentication and authorization. So we have you heard about the CIA triad at the beginning of the year. There's another concept that you should know: identity, authentication, authorization, and access. Some frameworks add another A behind, and I think it's audit. But in most common framework, people that talk about this framework, it's IAAA. So the definition here is from OWASP directly. The process of verifying that an individual entity or website is who or what it claims to be by determining the validity of one or more authenticator. That's what you could define authentication as. So why is there authentication? Because if there's no authentication, I can say I'm you can say you're him, he can say he's someone else, and no one knows who's who. So that can be complicated, and you don't want your systems to be like an open door with just click of a button, you can access everyone else's life. So you need that to prevent unauthorized access, prevent account takeover, prevent data breaches, privilege escalation, lateral movement, vertical movement. Anything that would normally be blocked would be open, so that's really where you need it. And authentication directly supports the CIA triad because it helps in confidentiality, integrity, and availability as well. So that's magnificent. Different type of authentication. You must have heard about the three concepts of something you know, something you have, something you are. These are three main concepts of authentication. So something you know can be a password, a PIN, maybe a code that you written down, or a hash or something like that. Something you have can be your smartphone. You got these applications, Google authenticators, things like that could correspond to something you have. Getting SMSs as well, smart cards, getting one-time passwords, and even a phone in itself or a YubiKey or things like that could be considered as something you have. And something you are. This is a dangerous place here for cybersecurity. So for people in offensive security, it's absolutely wonderful. But when you're the people that are defending, it's quite hard. Because something you know can be changed. Something you have is a bit harder to change, but you can change it. But something you are, how do you change something that you inherently are? That's quite hard. So if someone gets a hold of your biometrics, what are you going to do? Cut your finger off? Nah, probably not. So be careful on what you trust with something you are, because even if it's quite powerful and quite hard to spoof something like that, once someone has this record, it's done. You're not going to change your DNA, you're not going to change your iris patterns, you're not going to change your fingerprints. I mean, you can, but it's a lot of efforts for something that could have been easily avoided. So be careful with your biometrics and your personal data, because this is something you can never change. You've probably all seen this one. So they release one for every year. This is a nice image showcasing how much time it takes for a nowadays system to crack your password. So I'm going to ask you guys a quick question here. Who has a password that holds more than 1,000 years? Hopefully everyone. Okay. Oh, you need to change your password. No. Okay, so most people here do have passwords that hold more than 1,000 years. Here I was looking at this one. So this is this one right there is the one that I was looking at. If you have something that beats that, you should be all good. Everything that is in the yellow and the green should last you a few more years before you're in trouble. But everything that is in the red and everything that is less than 1,000 years could be quickly a problem if you leave it unchanged. Apart from that, what makes a good password? Entropy in this password, the resistance to brute force. So this is measured by not using some existing words, maybe some random characters. So this also comes with entropy. But brute force resistance also relates to the very common passwords that exist today. Please don't add this in your passwords. If your password is password, change your password, please. And you can also use some credentials. So if your password has been released very recently, or your credentials have been released to the public very recently, you need to change it. And that also links with the reuse. So, okay, now we understand ways of authentication. We're going to start on specific things, specific ways, so you know about passwords. What about sessions? Sessions and cookies will be together here. But I'll do a comparative just after to show you that they're not exactly the same thing. Why do we need sessions? This applies more to the web. In the web, the methods and everything are stateless. That means you don't have a way to keep track of user states. Is he logged in? Is he not logged in? Who is he? Who's sending the request? Where is it from? You need all this data. And this data can be stored in sessions and cookies. But with these sessions containing that much data, it also makes them quite a good target for attacks. So sessions allow people to stay logged in. You are still logged in once you've went to do something else if you come back, because you don't have to re-enter your credential and you can maintain that state. Leading to certain risks like hijacking the sessions tokens. If you leave an expiry, you'll see in everything that we showed today, expiry is a very redundant vulnerability on almost everything. If you don't set a proper expiry and you set it too long, you can lead to brute force possibilities. You set it too short, no one's going to be able to log in or stay logged in. So you need to do some compromises here. And the cross-site scripting to read the cookies and the session tokens is also something that's very targetable. Should keep them random, unpredictable, and signed for other types of tokens. So I talked about the IAAA framework here. You see on this image, it added the auditing part. This is not a must. The thing that you must remember is identification, authentication, authorization, and accountability. What does that stand for? Firstly, when the user comes on your system, you need to identify him. Who is he? Well, why is he here? Is he really who he says he is? That's a bit of authentication as well. Is this guy some random guy trying to say he's someone else, or is he really the person that he should be? Then you authorize this person. Okay, he is actually himself. What are the privileges he can have within our app? So that's the authorization part. And then at the end of the day, accountability. This is more related to the logs and keeping records of what people and what actions these people perform on your systems. And I'm not going to talk about the auditing part because, as I say, you can find it quite specifically in certain interpretations, but most of the time it's not here. So you might have heard of session tokens and you might have heard about cookies. What are the difference? Is there a difference? So the cookie will be something that has been here for way longer than session tokens, but have way more standards than tokens. Tokens can be whatever the person that did the token would like it to be. So you can have a token for a person that is A, B for the second person, C for the third person, and you would just have to change the letter if you understand the order to impersonate another person. Because the person that did the token, that created the token-based management, did not do something secure. With cookies, it's way harder to get this problem because, as I said, there are a lot more standards that you need to respect. It's for applications to communicate with each other on cookies. So one of the most common type of token is the JSON Web Token, which we will talk about very soon. And cookies have four parameters that you can add to them when you send them through a HTTP request: secure, expire, HTTP only, and same site. Expire does exactly what you think it would do, sets an expiry date to your cookie, always very useful. Same site prevents against cross-site scripting attacks by saying if this cookie can be sent from another site which is not part of the whole application. HTTP only will say that this cookie can be read by client-side JavaScript or not. And secure will say that this cookie can only be transmitted over verified HTTPS channels, so no HTTP transports, so no way of eavesdropping on these connections. This here is a comparison between cookies session management and token session management. While reading through it, you will understand that cookies are the practical parts and tokens are less practical, but way more customizable than cookies and way more recent, so less standardized. So both of them are good for something. Choose the one that corresponds most to what your application needs to have. So, okay, we have these sessions, we understand what they are. Now we need to exploit them. 3 ways of doing it quite nicely. Firstly, it does happen a lot in the wild. Its sessions and tokens are weak sometimes. The algorithms that are used to deploy them are absolutely not conform to the security measure norms and security signatures that they should have. So it's weak, and you can crack it with Hashcat or something like that. Okay, easy. If it's custom, give it a go. Every time, if you see a custom cookie, give it a go. If someone did a custom implementation, there is a lot of probability that it's going to be not as good as the standard implementations, or maybe purposely vulnerable. Maybe it was a custom default cookie for a testing that the developer forgot to take out. That happens a lot as well. Second thing, is that the token signature verified? Tokens have a certain signature. If they're not verified, you can change the value in this token, and it will be, as it's not verified, it will be interpreted as such. For example, if your token transports the data saying you're a user, and you modify this data in the token saying that you're now an admin, if there are no signatures, there are no way to verify that this token was initially the one sent, and so you modified your token, congratulations. Another attack is called session fixation. So if a web page already gave you a token before you authenticated, you can use this token, send it to someone else, he will authenticate with that, and you will get access to his account. So the drawing here is a drawing that explains exactly that attack. So this happens if your web app gives you a proper session before you even authenticate on that web app. So, then multi-factor authentication. You probably heard about it. If you've worked in a company, you will probably be forced to use it, and I think it's for the better. But most companies that deal with a lot of important data have multi-factor authentication with 3 or more different items, and will ask you to connect every time and do that multi-factor authentication every time. But it's for good reasons. So 2-factor authentication, 2FA, it's only something that requires your identity twice. And multi-factor, it requires your identity multiple times. The difference is 2FA is MFA, but MFA is not 2FA. So multi-factor authentication, you can have 2-factors authentication in multi-factor authentication. So you'll use 2FA to describe that. But you can have 3-factor authentication, and that won't be 2FA. So that's only MFA, because it's multi-factor. Hopefully that's clear. Then, so the goal of this is to reduce the impact of a password compromise. If someone gets your password, is he going to be able to get your phone too? Is he going to be able to get spoof your location? Is he going to be able to get your imprint, your prints? Is he going to get at all that? Probably not. So it should stop attackers in theory if it's not poorly implemented, which does happen. So how do you bypass that? It's quite hard, but you can bypass that. And most of the time, it has something to do with the one-time password you get or the second authentication bypass. So the password, you can brute force. You can try to brute force at least. But then you get the second or the third way to authenticate yourself. And this can be done with guessing and brute forcing as well. If you have an OTP, so one-time password that is sent, if you can try all the different combinations of OTPs, you will find it eventually. Most of the time, it's 6 numbers. You can try all the combinations until 99,000, sorry, and 99. Okay, I mean you get the idea. You can try all that, If there is no rate limiting, you'll be able to try all that, and at the end of the day, you will guess that password. If there is rate limiting, for example, the website tells you have 3 tries maximum, then it's going to be way harder for you to start doing brute force because it's going to change every time, and you only have 3 guesses, so almost impossible. But if there is no rate limiting, and if there is a way to brute force the one-time password or brute force the second authentication method, then that's the way to do it. So, we talked about tokens. We said there was something called the JSON Web Token, which was quite popular. What is the JSON Web Token? And I would suggest you guys pay close attention to that, because for the people that are interested in CTFs and challenges, this is a very, very common challenge. There are a lot of ways to bypass this. So, this is a sort of token. One of the standardized ways of doing a token, it's a JSON, JSON format that has been split in 3 different data parts. The first one is the header, which will specify the type of algorithm that has been used to encode this token, and the type of token, maybe some more or less data on this one. The payload here can be anything you want. Most of the time in authentication mechanisms, it is something as role user, username with your username, something like that. And then the third part is the signature part, where the token has been signed by the computer that sent you the request, and then it should the signature should match on the next request as well. And that's also what is used to check if the token has been modified or not. So quite important, the signature here. And the signature matches the encoding that you specified in the header. So you can see here, we specified HS256 as encoding. And you can see here, HMAC SIHA 256 has also been used to encode the signature. So it's these tokens are base 64 encoded, so you can decode them. Yes, go for it.
So this is the way it works, that secret that's part of the signature is something only stored on the server in a blue box.
This one?
Yeah.
Yes, so this is something that is, as you said, only stored on the server that generates the tokens. This is most of the time a string, or you can store it in your environment variables, but this is something that you should not know. Like the person that receives it should not know. You have a possibility to do it. You have a possibility to do it to sign it symmetrically and asymmetrically for JSON Web Tokens. But here the secret, if you had the secret, that would mean you could sign your own tokens. And if you had this secret, for example, I could say modify the whole token, sign it again with the secret, and then that would go unnoticed in the web app, and I would have changed everything on the token, and it would have been interpreted as a normal token for the web app, because I have his secret to sign this token.
But effectively, it's completely reliant on the principle that the client of the web application never gets hold of the secret.
Yes, it's secret for a reason. It needs to be kept secret. And for certain challenges, for example, you have you have weak secrets where that happens. People that sign with weak secrets, you can brute force it. You have secrets that are leaked. For example, when they tell you never leave your when you do some Python Flask or you emulate some web servers, they say never leave your debug mode. There are multiple reasons for that. Never leave the developer mode on. One of these reasons is that when you leave that developer mode on, it shows the part of your code that generated that error, but it also shows the lines above and the lines under. And sometimes people make an error next to the JSON Web Token generation, and then you can see the secret with that. And it actually leaks the whole secret, because on the line that had no relation to the initial bub, you can see the secret in the code. That's the problem. And if you get the secret, that's it. You've broken the authentication. So why is this popular? Because it has no server-side session storage. It scales very, very well for APIs, and it's used in a lot of microservices and a lot of web apps nowadays, because it's really easy to manipulate and to understand. As I said, it's base 64, so it's quite easy to read if you want. So how do you bypass that? There are 3 very common attacks. Firstly, when the computer does not verify the signature. There are some times where the server does not verify the signature, and you can use it and just send whatever you want, and it will be interpreted on its own. When that happens, most of the time, the GWT, as you remember, is split into 3 parts. The parts are separated by a dot. if that happens, you can just leave, so your header part, dot, your payload part, dot, and don't put a signature. Just leave the dot here, and you should be able to bypass everything if it does not verify the signature. There's also something called downgrading to none. So as we said, JSON Web Tokens have an algorithm used to encrypt them, but there is also the non-signing algorithm, and if it's been allowed, so if you can sign they've allowed the JSON Web Token to be signed with any methods, you can sign it with none, and you don't need to use a signature anymore. That's quite nice, and it happens a lot as well. Just specify your new signing algorithm as none, and then take away your signature, and you're done. They initially require the signature, but your token now corresponds to your initial algorithm, your header algorithm that says there is no algorithm, so you don't need a signature. So that's it. You downgrade it to none. Congratulations, your token is now one of the computer's ones. And also, last one, a bit harder to understand, signature algorithm confusion. So you might have an algorithm, so that comes back to what you initially said about symmetric and asymmetric. You might have an asymmetric signing algorithm initially attached to your token, but you're allowed to change this algorithm and downgrade it to something that is symmetric. Asymmetric being a public key and a private key, symmetric being just a key being shared with the two parties. So you're gonna ask me, okay, what becomes the symmetric algorithm, the symmetric signing key then? Ask me the question. Go for it.
Yeah, which one of those two is used as the secret in the HTML?
So there is, you can use you initially knew the public key to sign your token. That's normally, you didn't know the private key, but you initially.
Use the private to decrypt.
Yeah, you use normally the private. Yeah, you use the private key. The public to encode and the private to decrypt.
So you need a HVAC SHA algorithm that takes in two parameters to decrypt a private key and then the payload that you're decrypting, as opposed to maybe just.
Don't feel observed. I just saw two people just turn. Now, oh shit, I don't have any more battery. Sorry about that. No, but so the thing here is that the JSON Web Token security will downgrade from asymmetric signing to a symmetric signing. So the public key you initially had to sign will stay the public key, but now because you only need the public key, you already have the way to sign your algorithm. So you keep the signature. And you just sign it with the public key directly instead of the secret, and you should be good to go. Hopefully.
Sign it with the private key for the asymmetric one.
For the asymmetric, yeah, but when you transfer something from an asymmetric to a symmetric one, you should.
Use the public key. Yeah.
Yeah, you can just use the public key, and that's it. That's sorted. Initially, where is the plug? Initially, you had.
It's the one next to the little button thing, little circle, on the desk.
Yes, there is a plug on the desk. I love technology. Thank you very much. Sorry, now because I'm used to plugging it back to the classroom. But yeah, so initially you had something that you had a secret value that you didn't have, which was the private key for signing, and then now you have only one key, which is the public key, which you already have because you confused the signing algorithms, and so you already have this key. Just sign it with your public key signature, and you have a validated token. So the first two ones will tell you, oh, you don't need a signature. The last one will tell you need a signature, but I can make a good signature for you, which is wonderful. Why is there this URL here? Because it's a very, very nice website to modify and touch on JSON Web Tokens here. So you can see this is the initial format that we talked about. You can see the first dot here, the second dot here, and this makes the three separated sections. And what that actually tells you is this is exactly this JSON Web Token. So you can see the header part has the type of JSON Web Token, the algorithm that is used. The payload has a lot of info that we don't really care about. But here, this would in a pen test scenario, this would be very important. And here, at the end of the day, you have the signature and the secret where you would put your secret here to sign your JSON Web Token. Because this should be asymmetric if I'm not mistaken. Can someone tell me if this is asymmetric or symmetric? I think this is asymmetric.
I think that's asymmetric.
Yeah, so that's why you need a key here, and this key can be absolutely anything with a certain length, and if you don't input the correct key, it will tell you that it failed.
Symmetric, it's just one key.
Symmetric is one key, and
And there's just
asymmetric.
one key
Yes.
there. On your slide example, it was that. It was H, HVAC shell 2 plus H plus symmetric.
So that's a symmetric one. So maybe I made a mistake on the slide. Give me a second.
If you know the huge prime number. But I mean, if you know the huge factor of which the two goes to the power. HVAC shell 2 plus H.
Did I make a mistake on the slides? Oh, where
I
is
think so.
It's HS is symmetric.
it's asymmetric or symmetric? Symmetric. So then,
Makes sense, yeah.
so yeah, no. So then you're right. Can I go back to? Oh my God. Okay. SHA 2 something. 250. Yeah, 256. So yeah, so that's a symmetric one. Sorry about the issue. I mean, in any case, you still need to add a secret at the end, but then this secret would be used for signing and for decrypting and encrypting the token, if it's symmetric. You're getting me confused at the end of the day.
No,
Normally, tell me if I make a mistake on that. So yeah, in any case, you will need to sign it. The question is the keys going to be used to decode it as well or encode it as well? Hopefully that makes sense. Sorry about that. So back to the slides. So yeah, use this very pretty website to decode and encode your JSON Web Tokens if you have any CTF scenarios or any places where you need to manipulate this. Now OAuth. Okay, OAuth. You might have never heard of it. You might have already heard of it. What is OAuth? OAuth is the way to authenticate with third-party services. So you might have already seen login via Google, login via GitHub, login via something else. This is OAuth. So why we call it OAuth? It's actually OAuth 2.0. There was OAuth before with something we call grant types that were very vulnerable. So we had to do a whole rework and call it OAuth 2.0. It's very, very used. Very, 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 very much used. And there are a few things that you need to understand for OAuth. There are things that we call core components with all a bunch, you don't have them all here, but a bunch of names to identify actual components of this framework. So resource owner is the server that holds the resource. The client is the person that requests the resource. Authorization server is the server that validates that a client has the authorization to request a certain resource. And you have resource owner is the, oh my God, it's going to be confusing. Resource owner and resource servers are not the same thing, but can be the same thing. So you have a lot of components. They are not all here, but there is a whole system on how OAuth works and how it actually manages to have grant types, which are right here, which are a sort of network topologies, but not exactly network topologies, but schemas on how the whole trust model is made in OAuth. There are a lot of them. The most common one is this one. And you can now understand why I didn't put all of them because it would have taken ages. But this one is a secure one. So don't expect to find any vulnerabilities here. It's the most popular one and the most secure one we have. It's called authorization code. It enhances security by exchanging an authorization code for an access token. So there are two ways of access two methods of authentication. Then you never get the access token. It's shared between the resource server and the application and the authorized server, but never to the resource owner. So yeah, that's one thing. So you try to access, it sends a request of authorization, you send authentication and grant authorization. That is now sent directly to the authorized server. Authorized server does a lot of processes with the application to request what you initially asked for with the now validated access token. Once this is done, the application then queries the resource server and it gets the resource server to then display to the resource owner the information he initially asked for. It's a bit confusing. There are a lot of words you need to use to describe the components that are quite specific. So I'm not going to talk too much about this, but you need to know it exists. And this is the way that you can that third-party services are used to authenticate. How do you bypass that? Firstly, you need to identify it. So imagine you have this URL. You would probably recognize it from TrackHackMe. Then on this URL, you have a lot of parameters in your request. So if you don't know what a parameter in a request is, it's something where you have n%. Yeah, exactly. Sorry. When you have an n% and a value after with an equal, this is a parameter with the actual value. So when you see response type, client ID, redirect URI, scope, and state, most of the time it means that it's using OAuth. Particularly pay attention to the state parameter, which is very important here because you can do an attack on that. So you can use a replay attack on these actual whole URLs to capture the valid tokens and use them when someone actually logs in. You can do that if it's misconfigured, because if there is an actual state and an actual way to track if the user has logged in or not, you won't be able to do any replay attacks. And if there is a weak or missing state parameter, which is the last one here, so in this framework, it protects against cross-site request forgery attacks. When you try to get the info, unwanted action, so if you get, what is basically said here is that if you forward, you make a request for an OAuth, so you try to connect to something using, for example, Google, you send your Google login page to someone else, he's gonna log in using that, and then you, with your account, have access to his Google account because he logged in for you on his services that are linked with your account. Hopefully it makes sense. So this can be due to a missing state parameter. Then we got single sign-on, used by a lot of people, enterprise, universities, cloud platforms. It's very good and centralized identity management, but it's a single point of failure. Single sign-on is really here to say we only have one way to sign in to multiple services. Oh, it's very, very nice because we got one way to do it, so you won't have to bother in having 150 passwords. But if you get it compromised once, you compromise the whole thing. So it's a nice single point of failure, but your enterprises and universities use it a lot because it's easy to manage. Kerberos. You might have heard Kerberos if you're interested in Active Directory or in Windows. This is very, very used for, it's a ticketing authentication mechanism. Sorry for the typo, I don't know why there's an I up there, but sorry about that. Very common in Active Directory, as I said. Can be exploited with ticket abuse, poor key management. There's something called Kerberosing, which is a ticket abuse as well. It's a name of an attack. You're going to find the weirdest names in cybersecurity attack names. But yeah, Kerberos, it holds from the Greek mythology, the dog with 3 heads in front of hell. And so this is where the name comes from. And yeah, it's because the dog controls who goes in and out of hell. So this is probably the best way to name an authentication mechanism. I'm not going to go through exactly how it works because it can be quite complex, but it works with tickets. So someone asks for a ticket, then gets granted his ticket, then then goes for access and so on and so on. SAML, which is another very used authentication authentication method, on XML based. So on Windows, you'll find it a lot. 3 items here: identity provider, service provider, and assertions. Assertions are XML documents. So the identity provider asserts the identity of the service provider using these documents, which contains information. And XML documents are not very protected, so as you can guess, if you get your hands on this the XML document, you can start to do some nasty stuff. It's used in Enterprise Identity Federation, cloud services, and corporate login systems. Again, also used in Active Directory because it's based on Windows due to the XML documents. Hardware security modules as well. They're used for authentication again. We call them HSMs. You might have heard about TPMs for hardware security. So this is very, very used nowadays. It's something that is physically in your computer. So someone from 20,000 kilometers away is not going to be able to hack your computer or do some weird things with your physical security modules. The Thales HSM here that you see is something I've been around personally, and it makes a lot of noise. And they keep it very much locked up, and every time they want to use it. So when I was working, this was for the secure key generation team, so it was not for us, but the people that generated the key to sign their algorithms for the company, they used this. And every time they took it out and did the whole key, they called it key ceremony to generate the key, they had to have a whole lawyer and a whole the whole system of people looking over the shoulders to make sure they're not doing anything wrong and generate a proper key. So it's a really important matter, and it's probably the only real secure way we have of generating keys for signings with hardware security modules. So yeah, it's quite nice, and it also can be stored to protect the keys inside. One last thing, we already talked about that at the beginning of the year. It's the zero trust principle. But I cannot talk about authentication without talking about the zero trust principle. It's about never trusting anyone and having multiple layers of defenses in your systems. So every time someone wants to access something different, they have to authenticate every single time. Even if they are authenticated 5 seconds before, they will have to authenticate again. Worst nightmare of university students, but sorry guys, it is the same thing as the Authenticator app for every time you open an ED page, even if you just opened one 5 seconds ago. It's zero trust principle. But it's good in company environments and in very public environments where a lot of data is shared and a lot of private stuff exists. This is probably the best way to apply security. You check for people, you check for hardware, you check for software, you check for everything, and every time there is a new step, you authenticate. You authenticate and you authorize, and you have the users that have authorization have the least possible authorizations in the systems. You're not going to give some random guy working in marketing root accesses of the Amazon Web Service instances. That makes absolutely no sense. That's the least privilege concept as well. And that's mostly it. And you log and you monitor all the activities, of course, if you trust no one. So these are the sources for today. There are a few things here. Most of the sources you'll find are about HSMs, because I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was talking about with HSM. And apart from that, that's mostly it for today. So thank you very much. It's a shorter one than last time, but I think it's not for the worst. So thank you.